Good morning. We are here on the grounds of Parkview Presbyterian Church, and I'm here with Lillie Yee-Shiroi, who was one of the first participants, the original participants of ACS. And when's the last time you were at Parkview?
Well, the last time I was at Parkview was probably at a Parkview breakfast fundraiser.
Right.
And this house used to be yellow, and recently it got painted white.
Yeah, well, you know, being part of the Parkview family, we had this place called the Corner House. And with your involvement, how did it become Yellow House?
Well, what I remember is that I first got involved because I was a student at UC Davis, and the Asian American Studies was offering a class, a community service project class, where we could come in and we were assigned to work with the William Land School students who might need help with English. At the time, the school was like over 50% Chinese, and there were no Chinese-speaking staff, and the only Chinese person was the school secretary. So I signed up for the class, my roommate signed up for the class, and so there were only two of us who came into Sacramento.
Wow.
And we went to William Land School. We met two young students. I still remember their name. It was Pak Lim and Sam Tam, and we started with them in the school cafeteria. But not long after that, it was the spring of 1970, Parkview approved our use of this building for our tutorial.
Oh, great.
So we walked the couple students over to this house, and it was yellow. And so they said, oh, it's the Yellow House. And before long, it was their brothers and sisters and friends who were coming to the Yellow House, and the name stuck.
Ah, terrific. Now, who was the instructor of Asian American Studies at the time at UC Davis?
I'm pretty sure at the time it was Isao Fujimoto.
Oh, Professor Fujimoto, okay. Yeah, he was very much involved with the community. Mm-hmm. In his later years, he was involved with the farming community. Mm-hmm. So what type of activity did you have here at the Yellow House?
At the time we started that initial quarter, it was basically assisting them with homework assignment. It was an after-school homework support kind of project. And I remember a quarter is only 9 weeks, so after that time, the tutorial the school ended, and so the tutorial concluded. But in the summer that year, we had a lot of volunteers that came from the Sac State University, and one of the students, his name was Gary Matsumoto, took a lead role in organizing the first Yellow House recreation program that summer. And so we had quite a few students come, quite a few volunteer students come to help on the program, and a lot of kids in the neighborhood came here. So after that summer, it was well established. Yellow House was the place to come for those kids.
I understand also the Yellow House was also, prior to that, was called Asian American Field Office. So there were some other activities going on too?
Well, during that summer, that's when I first remember that it was also called the field office, and there were activities or students that also came and worked on like doing research on what kind of services were available for the people that lived in the South Side neighborhood. Primarily people who were immigrant, didn't speak English well, and that project.
So that was a time where perhaps Asian communities type of services were pretty much involved in starting information referral type of services that was helping.
I think that was the beginning of
the
establishing.
local neighborhood.
Yeah, establishing the need.
Yeah, because Parkview is one of the many churches in the South Side neighborhood, and Parkview was involved. Later on, I believe the Buddhist church was involved in terms of other activities that was started by the Asian Community Services. Did you use the Southside Park for some of the activities also?
Well, Southside was very conveniently located across the street. So during the summer recreation, there were team sports that were organized, and yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that some of the viewers that seen this program and your description of the tutorial program with the Yellow House, I'm hoping that some of the viewers will be those people who are now watching, remember those years. We may have some kids that you had back in the days who are now 50 some odd years old or older, which will be terrific, because I believe some of the viewers that seen the history of Asian Community Centers services will reflect a lot of that memory back in those days when it all began. So if the viewers, if you see yourself or heard your name mentioned, give Asian Community Services and let them know. Yes, so, you know, Parkview was very much involved with the Yellow House, or back in those days, we used to call it the Corner House. And the Yellow House term really picked up with Parkview people. Some of the people from Parkview that were involved with the Yellow House were Chris and Tosh Kurotomi. They were involved in helping out with the Yellow House. Our session members like Carney Owe and George Matsuoka from our church were very supportive of the activities, what was happening at the Yellow House, especially supportive of the immigrant community. And you recall any more people that were involved?
Well, I know that there was a lot of students that came from Sac State, and they were supervised by student volunteers. And I remember John Ng being a supervisor, and I think at one point Harold Fong was also a supervisor of the tutorial from Sac State. And I'm not sure that we actually had supervisorial leadership when we were coming from Davis, but Davis Asian American Studies supported the Yellow House for probably a number of years. I remember that we always got a car from the university garage so we could drive tutors into Sacramento to work with the Yellow House.
Yeah, well, from what I understand, the Asian American Studies provided financial assistance in terms of paying a very minimal rent to Parkview. And I think they also mentioned about having insurance in the event that somebody might get hurt. So although Parkview has insurance, but it's always good to have organization that uses the facilities to also have insurance. And I think those are the key decisions for the decision of Parkview to allow the Yellow House and its activities to happen.
Well, I think thinking back, we really made great use of the Yellow House, and it became like a big attraction for students who wanted to get involved in the community and become familiar with people who lived here, what their problems were, and from there move on to other services and other, maybe careers.
Yeah, great.
Oh, Hach.
Okay.
Now you got security windows.
Yes.
We didn't have that before.
We've had problems with break-ins, so we put up these security for the windows. We also put in a new
Ooh,
air conditioner in for the house. We made a lot of changes since back in the days when it was being used as a yellow house. We are now on the corner of 8th and T, outside of front of the yellow house. And from here, we are going to be going over to William Land School, where the old office of Asian Community Service Center, which is across the street from William Land School. So this is, oh, the address is still up there, 729 T Street. So this is front of the church, and the ground. We're still on the grounds of Parkview Presbyterian Church, and a lot of changes have been made since Lillie was involved with the tutorial program.
Yeah, and the trees, wow. They really cover the whole house.
If the trees could talk, they have a lot of history to talk about.
What did a typical day look like when people were coming in and out of the store? Do you remember the hustle and bustle?
Well,
okay, your turn.
Well, during the tutorial, we had kids that were basically walking from William Land School and coming here to find the tutor that would be working with them. Usually a tutor was assigned to a same student for the semester. The doors were open, and we had tables set up so that every room had tables set up so students could sit down and do homework.
Because William Land School is only about 6 blocks away, because we're on T Street, and William Land School is on the corner of 12th and V, so it wasn't a very far distance.
Yeah, and they even lived in, some of them came from the projects, and others were living down this side of the town, so it was like kind of in their neighborhood.
So you have students from New Helvetia coming over here too.
In fact, the first 2 students that we met actually lived in New Helvetia.
Yeah, okay, so you have students from New Helvetia, but the other housing project will be River Oaks, but they went to Jedediah Smith School probably.
Maybe.
So Southside neighborhood pretty much, in terms of William Land School, pretty much took care of all the neighborhood in this area.
Yeah, because all through all these streets, kids were coming from, their homes were in Southside.
Yeah, because over the years, even before the field office took place here, there were a lot of turnovers with immigrant families moving to Southside neighborhood. And I think what we'll do is let us go over to the old office of 1118 V Street, where Asian Community Services spend most of their time providing those services, and some of the activities that took place across the street from ACS would be William Land School. So let's go over there and continue our conversation. You game?
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
We're going to walk?
Okay. So thank you for coming out here and talk with us about
You're welcome,
the early
Hach.
years.
It's been a long time, 50 years.
Like I said, if these trees could talk, they could have a lot of voice in terms of what was happening here. Okay, we are now at the old Asian Community Services office. Could you tell me your involvement as one of the coordinators with ACS?
Well, ACS, when I got involved, was after I graduated in '71.
Okay.
I volunteered to be one of the coordinators at ACS, and at the time ACS was kind of in its infancy, starting in interpreter referral service.
Oh, okay.
And we had like a small staff, and we got staffing through work-study program at Sac State and at City College. So we had Miyako Didion, who was bilingual Japanese.
Oh yeah, I remember her. Yeah.
And then we had, I think his name was Mr. Leong. And he was the bilingual Chinese interpreter. He came from Sac City. And we also had a secretary, Lois Wong, who was also from Sac City. So that was our staffing at the time. And we were able to start, or we didn't start, but we were asked to set up a space so that some of the Issei's in the neighborhood could have a knitting class. So that was the very beginning of a senior program at ACS. So in, I think about 72, the Issei's were very interested, had already gone on several field trips and had visited senior centers, and they became very interested in having their own program. So of course we thought it was a great opportunity to approach the city to ask them to help sponsor a program that would serve and provide probably Asian language instructors. So we went to City Council with a proposal, and the City Council at the time wasn't sure they had enough money, but eventually they thought we could provide some kind of funding and put us on the annual budget. Well, that was great news. So right away we wanted to get our programs together, get teachers certified, and I remember I called my friend Margaret Fujita, who was studying ceramics at the Art Institute in San Francisco. And she, of course, said, well, not of course, because she's a very generous lady, she said she'd be willing to help set up the first ceramics class. So that was the beginning of the program. And as soon as that year, it was maybe the fall of 72, we got funding, and we also secured space at William Land School to do like the ceramics class and arts and crafts class for seniors.
Yeah, so it was fortunate that the Office of Asian Community Services was located here, because, funnily enough, William Land School was across the street, and that made it a lot convenience to set up some of the programs there. What we're interested also in for our viewers in terms of some of the activities that was going on here at ACS. And one of the things that you just mentioned that ACS was able to provide services were bilingual services, which was practically unknown in all the social services in Sacramento County. So that started the program going in terms of bilingual services. I'm sure that many of the immigrant families that came to your office had asked for assistance with their monthly bills or medical bills that they may receive to explain their situation. So that was one of the first services that was provided in, as far as I know, in Sacramento County in terms of providing bilingual and perhaps bicultural services. Especially when you work with immigrant children, because I'm sure that the immigrant children, while going to William Land School, brought home some of the materials to their parents and may have some difficulty explaining to their parents what the grades, what type of grade it was, or what kind of homework they were having. So with your tutorial program and the services, made it a complete social service access for the entire family. So with that word getting around, more and more people were coming to Asian Community Services, because Asian Community Services laid the groundwork for future social services being developed for the Asian community. I want to explain to our audience, if you don't know, Lillie has used the word essays. Essays is a Japanese term for first generation of people who are of Japanese ancestry, and they were mostly, their language mostly were in Japanese. So that also helped, because this neighborhood also housed a lot of essays in the area. In fact, my my wife Linda's grandmother didn't live very far from her, as well as Mrs. Wasiju. She lived in the neighborhood too. And a lot of essays, when the word got around about the knitting class, ceramic class, more people in the neighborhood start coming to ACS. You recall any other names that were involved with ACS?
Trying to think, because there's so many people that came at the time. I know one thing that we, besides providing the service, I think because of the services that like the school and agencies were starting to respond and recognize that there was a great need and that they needed to do more than they had been doing. For example, one thing that happened then, because through Yellow House and us raising that concern that students weren't getting the help they needed in school, finally we got an Asian principal, Gladys Ping, at the William Land School.
Yeah, great.
And that really helped open up the school, because during that year, was I guess 1972, there was also a Chinese language school that was organized by Chinese Student Association from Sac State that was operating out of the New Helvetia projects. And it had grown to be like 100 or more students and outgrowing their space. So so they needed to relocate. So working with C.K. Wong and his brother, who also was C.K. Wong, we were able to negotiate with Gladys Ping, the principal, to use classrooms at the school. So they were able to relocate a Chinese school that operated on the weekends at William Land.
Do you remember the name of the Chinese school?
The name, they called it Puwa.
Puwa Chinese School. Okay.
Don't ask me to translate.
So perhaps some of the audience that's watching this program would remember some of the programs at William Land School, which is Puwa Chinese language class, or maybe perhaps their grandparents participated in some of the programs here, and they came along with their grandparents to seek out the activities here. I understand there was a garden in the backyard.
Well, yes, there was interest in growing vegetables and doing something in the ACS backyard, because these lots, they extend way back to the alley, and we weren't doing anything with the yard then. So there was a lot of interest in community service. So we even got, I remember the San Joaquin Miller Junior High School students, or Asian Club, came out to help dig up the ground to start the garden.
Oh, great. I didn't know that. Wow.
When you asked me about a name, if I could remember, I think I remember a name, Becky Masaki. I mean, I can't remember a lot of names, but
well, that's
that
okay.
name kind of stood out. And maybe she was president of the club. She organized a whole group to come out here and start the garden for the Issei's.
Yeah, because we're talking about going back approximately 52 years ago, and we're all getting up there in age, and I'm sure some of the viewers feel the same way of remembering a lot of things that happened back in the days. So, and you know, appreciate you coming out here and meeting with us and to talk about the early years of Asian Community Center services, which started this whole social service program especially for the elderly, because while ACS making that transition to Japanese Community Center, they too were meeting here before they moved to the
That's right.
Tambara House on the other side of Southside Park. So we had probably the entire neighborhood in this area surrounding William Land School coming to your services here, which opened the doors for many services to come. And Asian Community Services approach to Sacramento City in terms of funding for park and recreation was probably the first source of funding going to an established government-run program. And I'm sure a lot of the establishment were not familiar with some of the activities that was going on with Asian Community Services, and we will find out from the panel later on some of the successes that ACS made in terms of letting the wider community, the established community, that funding is not being provided to the Asian community, and that the Asian community is providing their form of taxes to contribute the city and county and state government. So we will hear later on during the panel some of the successes that took place that started with Asian Community Services. Well, you know, I want to recognize Lillie for taking the time with me to talk about her experience, first with the Yellow House at Parkview Presbyterian Church, and here again at her participation as one of the coordinators with the Asian Community Services back in the early days. Lillie, thank you for taking your time out and meet with us and telling the audience about your experience.
You're very welcome, Hach. It was a good brain exercise.